Good afternoon, Mr. Foy. Would you introduce yourself? Tell us your name and DOC number, please.
My name is Russell Edward Foy Senior. DOC number 99089.
All right, Mr. Foy, good afternoon. You're here this afternoon. Seek the commutation of your sentence. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize all the folks who joined us today. By Zoom, we have Mr. Norris Henderson. We also have Kenya Foy, Daryl Miles, Evelyn Thibault, and Director Deborah Lee. Here in Baton Rouge with us, we have Chico Yancey, Daryl Foy, Larry Foy, and I missed Ron Perry. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name, who will be speaking on your behalf. So we have Mr. Henderson, Mr. Larry Foy, and Mr. Ron that will be speaking on your behalf. We also have some folks in opposition. We have victim's sister, Ms. Ruby Corbin, by Zoom. Here with us in Baton Rouge, we have Tungia Corbin, Britannia Williams, Maxine Turner, Mamie Corbin, Sarah Corbin, and Carmelna Williams, who is also at the appropriate time will allow 3 of those in opposition to speak. First, let me just read some identifying information into the record, Mr. Foy, and then I'll turn it over to Mrs. Jackson in case it's been assigned to her. So, Mr. Foy, as mentioned, your DOC number is 99089. You're here, as we said, seeking the commutation of your sentence. You're currently serving a life sentence. You were sentenced in the 1st Judicial District, Caddo Parish, May of 1982 for 2 counts of 1st-degree murder. Is that information correct?
Correct.
Would you answer Mrs. Jackson, please?
Good afternoon, Mr. Foy.
Afternoon.
I'm Bonnie Jackson. Your case has been assigned to me, so I'll start the questioning for the board. First, how old are you?
71 years old.
And how long have you been incarcerated on this charge?
43 years. Next month be 43 years.
So you were how old when you committed this crime?
28 years old.
So let's talk about, you indicated that you had borrowed a car and $1,600 to travel from Dallas to Shreveport to buy marijuana. Is that correct?
Say that again.
Okay. I have, who is Isaac Coleman?
It was a cousin of mine.
All right. Well, the Ford Thunderbird was registered to Isaac Coleman.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Were you at any time the driver of that Ford Thunderbird?
No, ma'am.
And who was driving Mr. Coleman's Thunderbird?
Carl Corbin.
So if Mr. Coleman told the deputies when they they ran the plates on the car, found out who it was registered to, and they contacted Mr. Coleman, who lived in Westboro, and he said that, yes, you're right, he loaned the car to Mr. Corbin and provided him with $1,600 to purchase marijuana in Shreveport from an individual known as Russell. And that would be you, right?
That's me. Yes, ma'am.
So you were in the business of selling marijuana?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you get started in drug dealing?
Probably a couple of years before that time.
And how did you become involved in drug dealing?
messing around with the wrong crowd and
People say that all the time. Some might say you're the wrong crowd.
would turn into be that, ma'am.
Again, you know, you were in your mid-20s.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
again, how did you get involved in selling drugs? I get your start. Why did you start selling drugs?
Well, I was asked by them to, could I get this for them?
Why would they ask you?
Often when I come home and visit with them, and they try something, they ask me, could I get something for them?
I'll ask the question again. Were you in the business of dealing drugs back when this crime occurred?
Yes, ma'am.
Not just to Mr. Coleman or whoever the people you were talking about. That was kind of your livelihood, wasn't it?
I worked every day, but
Yeah.
those are the
And what
ones
kind
that
What kind of work were you doing?
worked on the freight line, transportation service,
Okay.
load and
And you
unload.
were, and you were selling marijuana on the side?
Whenever they ask, when I come home, bring them some.
They who? Who is this they you're referring to?
Carbon and a couple more guys.
And where was home?
Winsboro. That's where I
And
grew
you
up.
were, but you were living in Texas, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what happened on the date that the two people were killed, Ms. Williams and Mr. Corbin? Now, you knew Mr. Corbin, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did you know him?
Or during my school time. I graduated in '69, so I knew him from school.
Okay. And did you know Betty G?
I didn't know much about her.
Had you ever been around her and Mr. Corbin?
I've been around him, but not her that much. It was just that particular time.
What about the two children? Had you been around them?
No, ma'am, just on that day.
Ever been around them until, except on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so tell us about that day. Tell us about June 7, 1980.
June 7, 1980, I received a phone call early that morning, and it was to be a drug transaction. I was in Dallas, and I started out going to Shreveport to meet them, but I was having sometimes your conscience used to bother you like something was wrong. I started out, I did this 2 times, and the third time I left out. I went by the liquor store and purchased some alcohol or drink, and I went on my way.
Okay. When you got to Winsboro or Shreveport, wherever you were
Shreveport.
headed, what happened?
Shreveport, I met with Carl.
Where did you meet with him?
At a restaurant.
Okay. Who was with him?
Betty and the kids.
Do you remember about how old the kids were?
Well, I was told at that time one was 7, and the other one was 4, something like that. 6 or 4, 7 or 4.
So when you got in the car with Mr. Corbin and with Miss Williams, where were y'all going then?
We're down Service Road. And we stopped and were talking and got to arguing.
Arguing about what?
Just a normal argument, heated argument.
I don't know
About
what a normal argument is, Mr. Foy.
About drugs.
What about drugs were y'all arguing? You had agreed to sell them the marijuana for $1,600. So what was the argument about?
You just owe the drugs.
Why were you arguing? What about the drugs were you arguing? Did you
What
have them?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he have the $1,600?
We never got to that for on the purchase.
Well, then what was the argument about?
About the transactions.
And where were you seated in the car?
On the back seat,
And where were the children?
in the front seat with their parents.
And how did you end up shooting Mr. Corbin in the back of the head?
I was in the back seat of the car when I shot him.
Why?
It just happened, man.
No, sir, it did not just happen.
Well, really, I was, tell the truth, I was under the influence of alcohol and stuff like that, and just flipped out.
Why?
Just spurred the instant, I just
Were
flipped
you
out.
gonna rob him? Were you gonna take the $1,600?
No, man.
And why did you shoot Betty Jean?
Same way. It was just like covering up a crime.
And those two little girls were in the car with their parents when you shot them both in the head?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, you've given, at one point, in your statement, either in your application or when you were interviewed, you denied knowing what happened, claimed you were, drinking heavily. And then, in 2022, you said this happened a long time ago, so you didn't really remember what happened. I'm at a loss to understand how one fails to remember the details of shooting two people in the back of the head. I don't care how long it's been. But you said it was a long time ago. This incident happened a long time ago. Like it was nothing to you.
No, ma'am.
Now, Mr. Foy, I've looked at your case. Obviously, you've got lots of opposition, the judge, the DA, the sheriff's office, and certainly the families of two victims in your case are adamantly opposed. You know, you do have a good institutional record. Amazingly, you've only had one write-up in 30 years, 42 years. That was in 2005. It was a 30W. You've taken living imbalance in 2019, pre-release, you also took anger management, but most of your programs have been, shall I say, faith-based programs, not the normal classes that one takes through DOC. What is the Creflo $1 course? I mean, I know who he is and, you know, claiming that God will give you money if you send him money. So what kind of course did you take with him?
It's just that I watch his program through VCR and studied the teachings and donated money.
Okay.
I said
And I
all-
noticed a lot of your programs were in the early 90s. So from the early 90s to about 2019, you weren't involved in a whole lot of programs. Why is that?
I've been spending time in and out the hospital, medical problems,
What are your medical issues?
heart issues, diabetes.
How often have you been, when did you start going to the hospital and how long would you stay when you did go?
Well, the first time I stayed a week, I had take
What's the
cardio
what's the longest time you stayed in the hospital?
6 days.
Days.
Then I had to get.
Well, seems like that's not enough, you know, time in a hospital to prevent you from having done programs between 1993 and 2019. I mean, you did very few DOC credited programs during that time span. Now, you did take some vocational programs, but I don't see any real programs that address, you know, what it is that's in a person that would allow them to shoot two people in the presence of their children, people that they actually knew. And I don't see any programs addressing you as a human being. So explain to me, why should I believe that there's anything different about you today than when you committed this crime 42 years ago?
I received Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and I started studying for ministry. And doing ministry, I was vice president of a Christian fellowship where I taught Bible class and preached, and I ministered to a lot of people, helped them, got involved with them, helping them get their lives changed and turn around.
Okay. You've worked in the classification office for 20 years, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've, for the past 15, you've worked at the Angola TV station
Yes, ma'am.
and been a trustee for 30 years. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Those are all good accomplishments, Mr. Foy. But my concern is, what have you done to work on yourself as a human being? And I don't see much effort in that area to work on yourself as a human being.
I said I spend most of my time studying the Bible and try to apply the principles.
Okay, give me one that you're applying.
One of the things that I do and teach on and apply it personally to me is getting my mind renewed. In other words, changing my old way of thinking to God's way of thinking.
How do you do that?
I do that it's changed by the word of God. In other words, I was operating on the wrong thinking most of the time and doing wrong things. So I had to apply what the word says to get transformed to think about doing what's right in situations and circumstances, treat people right.
Well, what thought have you given to, Mr. Corbin and Ms. Williams's children over the last 42 years?
Say your question again, ma'am.
What thought have you given to children who were in that vehicle when their parents were murdered?
One thought I could give is that I was wrong in what I did, and I hurt and harmed them in such a way that they're with their parents.
Have you taken victim awareness?
I took some in my in one of those classes that offered up victim awareness and substance abuse, all that in the reentry program.
There's a separate program for victim awareness. Did you ever take that?
Oh, no, ma'am. No, ma'am.
What is the Robert Barrow Treatment Center and why were you there in 2020?
That's the hospital.
And how long were you there?
Actually, I work over in that area. TV stations in the hospital area.
Oh, okay, well, I guess I didn't understand why it was listed under your programs, 'cause that's where I got it from. But that's just a local where the TV station is. It's not any kind of program that you participated in. That was just where the TV station is that correct?
That came under community service. Things I do around the hospital to help inmates, you know, serve.
Give me an example.
Example is, for me, somebody need escorted somewhere, push them around in a wheelchair, help people get back down to walk, push them around in that wheelchair where they can't walk, and take them where they need to go. Or you go in and sit down and minister to them. Or to take something to feed them, you know, time to feed them.
Well, apparently your production work at the TV station is good quality. You've gotten letters of commendation from a lot of organizations that you've been involved with. You have support from a number of faith-based individuals. You have support from, family members, but also there's a whole lot of opposition. The victim's daughter is still opposed. The victim's brother is opposed. Her sister is opposed. They're very adamant in their opposition to your being released early, as are the DA, the sheriff's office, and the judge in this case, or presiding judge. Gordon, what can you tell us about Mr. Foy?
Your Honor, I really don't have anything extra to add. You touched base on everything that he did that I have written down in my notes also.
All right, thank you, Ms. Renata.
Okay, Mr. Hershey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Foy. How are you?
I'm doing great, sir.
So let's go back to that day. You got a telephone call and this person wanted some marijuana. Did you agree upon a price?
They know they know the normal price. I did, sir.
So what quantity of marijuana were you selling?
It's called Colombian, I believe.
what quantity?
Quality, Columbia, it's good marijuana. Quantity, oh. Pounds,
So it's an awful lot of marijuana for $1,600. So you knew exactly. So, and you said in your statement that a couple of times you got a feeling, you turned around, go back to Dallas, and you got back on the interstate.
yeah.
So what
Yes,
was
sir.
that feeling? What was that feeling?
Something was wrong. Just like something not right.
Still in all, you proceeded to Shreveport, am I correct?
Yes, sir. I went by the liquor store and I took a drink and I decided to go ahead on.
And when you arrived in Shreveport at the restaurant, you were driving a car, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, why did you find it necessary to get in the back seat with those two kids, and those two kids were not in the front seat? They were in the back seat with you. Because anybody our age knows that a late '70s Thunderbird probably had bucket seat, and those kids were in the back seat. So why did you find it necessary to get in the back seat with a gun and drive to a secluded area?
I was invited to get in the car, so I got in.
It was your suggestion that you get into their car and drive to a secluded area. If you're gonna do a drug transaction, you could have did it right at the restaurant. Why did you get in the back seat of that car with the kids with a gun in your possession?
I was wrong for it. And just
Could have been that you were going to relieve them of their money and keep the drugs. And it was a premeditated act on your part to shoot two human beings in the back of their head.
all I can say is I'm guilty of the crime, so.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ruth. We'll hear from the support now. Could we hear first from Mr. Norris Henderson?
Good morning. As soon as you called my name, I stuck something in my mouth. Sorry. I've been knowing Mr. Foy for a very long time. Me and Russell, one of the things that didn't come up with, me and Russell graduated from Northwest Missouri Community College in 92, 93, class 92, 93. And so some of the programming that Ms. Jackson was questioning about that, some people take different paths. Some of us took the education. I worked in a law library. I took the skill set that I learned from college to apply in a law library. Became, proficient at using computers. Russell became the clerk in the classification office where it was a mainstay. And so sometimes people go in different directions in the sense of what they do with their available time. Russell has been, when the conversation came up about the television station, Channel 21 didn't exist at one time. And so everybody who worked there acquired a skill. They were kind of like self-taught and learning that particular skill. And people gravitate to those areas that they are comfortable with. For as long as I've been knowing Russell has been affiliated with his faith-based community. And that's where he dedicated his life to, kind of like not only bettering himself, but everybody around him. And so there's a lot of folks that I know personally that Russell has ministered, that have changed their lives. And looking at Russell today and hearing Russell, I know that Russell has turned that corner. I didn't know Russell before he came to prison. But I can say one thing about that particular type of crime. That's a very dangerous game, drug trafficking, very dangerous game. And the fact that Russell said that he was kind of like apprehensive about what's going on. I worked in prison law library, and every case I worked on who had a drug-related case, they always had that same thing, that something told me not to go, some warning that I didn't heed. And I think for the sake of, him saying that is that he didn't listen to his conscience about not following through on what he did. And, it's kind of like the description Mr. Roche gave. I was trying to envision what that looked like sitting in the back of a car with kids. And I don't know if these kids were the children of the two deceased people or not, but just the vision of that, kind of like it's striking. But again, like Russell said again, he just didn't know what made him go through with what he went through with. But my testament is like, I know Russell, and I know given an opportunity to redeem himself, is that's what he's been trying to do for the last 43 years. Is trying to redeem himself, to try to recapture himself, trying to live the life that, God has created all of us to do, to kind of like live righteous. And I tell people all the time, I pray every day, not that my scale be balanced, that my good deeds far outweigh my bad. And I think we at this space now where everything that Russell has done through his incarceration is to demonstrate that I'm trying to do everything I can that these good deeds can far outweigh those two bad deeds I've done. And so I would ask that this board would consider making a recommendation for clemency on behalf of Mr. Foy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ron Harry?
Yes, thank you. I just want to support Russell for many of the same reasons Mr. Henderson just mentioned. I think in general, our system of justice needs to be tempered with some compassion. Surely we need to understand that people don't stay the same their whole lives. I think Russell has shown exerted a good bit of effort to rehabilitate himself so that he is no longer a threat to society. He spent 2/3 of his life practically in incarceration already. I think it's important that our society show some compassion. Let's let this man have an opportunity to enjoy his family a little bit before he passes away. So I would encourage you to show some clemency here. Parole is not a pardon, and he understands that, and so do we. But I ask you for your consideration to give him a chance again. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And here with us, Mr. Larry Foy. I'm going to step up to the podium, sir.
Good afternoon.
I can't hear you, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for extending the opportunity to stand here and support Tennyson request of my brother. And Larry Foy. I'm here with my brother Daryl, my sisters, all my niece, also back at the main prison. I understand that our nation is a nation of law, that we're governed by the highest law of the land, the United States Constitution. And that Constitution guarantees us certain freedoms and also guarantees us justice. Under the Constitution, he violated the law and he has been punished thereof. But I wish to appeal to a higher law, and that is the law of mercy. I hold in my hand the Bible, which is also has influenced this nation. And I am a religious scholar. I studied the Bible, PhD student at the University of Southern California. studied it as a doctoral ministry student at San Francisco Theological Seminary. I taught it as a pastor for 40 years. I taught it at college and seminary for 6 years. And from cover to cover, no matter how much I've studied this Bible personally or as a scholar, the overall arching theme of this Bible is about forgiveness, redemption, restoration, grace, and mercy. They put out three of the most influential characters in this Bible. All of you, not some, are familiar with show mercy. Moses, for example, committed manslaughter, which he imposed exile for 40 years. And after 40 years of self-imposed exile, God appeared to Moses, sent him back to Egypt. Moses liberates the Hebrew people. One of the greatest stories ever told in the annals of human history. I appeal to David, who's considered to be the greatest king of Israel. And it is David who writes the most beautiful of Psalms, including Psalm 23, which all of us are familiar with. Yet it was David who, with motive, had a man killed, a soldier of his, in order to cover up the illicit affair that he had with this man's wife Uriah. And yet, David found mercy. Because of David, we have again the most beautiful of songs. Then we turn to the New Testament. We have a person by the name of Paul, who's known as the Apostle Paul. Paul is the author of most of the New Testament. 27 books of the New Testament, Paul wrote 14 of them. Paul was not always the Apostle Paul. He was known by his Hebrew name as Saul. And it is Saul who consented to the first murder. The first person who was first Christian who was killed on behalf of the name of Jesus Christ, the person by the name of Stephen. It was Paul who stood in that crowd and urged them on, stoned Stephen to death. But then Paul was not through there. He got legal authority and legal authority from the Roman officials to arrest anybody who believed that Jesus was the Messiah. And he went on and had hundreds of Christians arrested. And some of them went to trial and some of them murdered. Paul found mercy. God gave him mercy. And because of Paul, Christianity exists today. He was the person whom God chose to spread Christianity throughout the then known. And it is because I believe we are here today. The world is not full of chaos, but God showed mercy to Paul. He showed mercy to David. He showed mercy to Moses. I appeal to you, show mercy to our Lord. In the second chapter.
Thank you. Okay, we'll hear now from the opposition. And first, if you could hear from Ms. Sarah Corbin.
Good evening.
Afternoon.
I am Sarah Corbin, sister. First of all, grace and mercy. Second of all, I should not keep it. My thing is, if she takes life, be ready to lay in his name. That's what I believe. Russell and I went to school together, 12 long years. Graduated from high school together. Me and his sister Carol. His brother and I worked together. His sister, Leon, and I consider Steve I'm a talking. The family didn't need off of me. That's why I can communicate with the family. I have no animosity against them for wanting their brother released. My thing is, he killed them and thought he took children out. The last time we were here, he wouldn't even admit to killing him. Now he's admitting because he's 71, I'm 70. I don't think he needs to be out because I believe in reform because I work at an institution. I believe that people can be reformed and do right. But when you take it upon yourself to get in the back of a car with 2 babies and murder their mother and father in front of them and try to take them out. First of all, I don't believe Russell was driving the car. I believe somebody else was behind this, but that's another story. And I didn't get up here to say all this. Got something wrote down, but that's not what I'm saying. He took a beautiful person. Carl was just as loving and laughable and always laughing at one another. And I don't feel like he needs to be out to be with his family. What are we going to? Okay. What are we doing? Memories. Today is really, really hard for all of us, especially the daughter. He has a daughter to face. He has grandchildren and great-grandchildren he has never been able to see. If Russell gets out, he can go. I don't think his life over with him. He live to 120. All I know. I feel good at my age, and me and him the same age. I'm still working. Who's to say he can't get out and get a job, get married, enjoy his family? I don't think it's right, but it's up to you. And I petition you today to have grace and mercy for us. Not against grace and mercy for him, but for us that are suffering. His family is not suffering. They can call him, they can write him, we can't do any of that. So I just appeal to you. No type of release, no matter what it is, work release, nothing. Let him stay where he is and let him ponder and think about this all, because like I said, we've been here before and he never admitted it. This time, it did something to me for him to tell us what he did to our brothers. Nobody never told us that, the way they were murdered and tried to take those girls out. He has children, I'm pretty sure. Nieces, nephews. What would he think? If he had to stand here and one of us, he'd be saying the same thing. Yes, sir, stay in jail. In prison. So I'm appealing to you, let him stay there. That's my feeling. I believe in God, I believe in redemption, I believe in all that. I'm a faithful church member. I just don't believe that somebody just willfully took somebody's life like that. And he still hasn't said he was sorry. Thank you, ma'am.
Miss Mamie Corbin?
Good afternoon. And thanks for this opportunity to speak on behalf of my car. Our family was notified by Facebook that Russell had requested that the board of courts review his life sentence, which would change the sentence for a certain number of years, giving Russell the opportunity to possibly be eligible for parole at some date in the future. I was informed that 45 letters were mailed to our family in February of 2023. After checking with the family members, no one, including myself, ever received notification until Wednesday, May 10th. It placed a hardship on us as family members trying to get down with the thing. I strongly suggest that correspondence to family members in the future be by certified mail. I did request that the year be pushed forward, but I was told that this was not going to happen. So we rushed down here and did the best we could to bring as many support family members coming. But we are very upset and disturbed that we did not get notification. So with somebody on the board, please check in this and don't let this happen again, because we plan to be here as long as we need to. We're here to tell you all that this man stay in this. I'm Mamie Corbin, Carl's sister. The purpose of this letter is to inform the board that I adamantly and strongly oppose Russell for receiving any consideration of any possibility of ever being eligible for parole. This man took the lives of my brother and his children's mother. My nieces actually witnessed the murder of their mother and father. These girls suffered long and hard over the death of their parents. I won't even mention when he gives a call to visit his parents. Our parents have since passed away. But during that time, after these deaths, it's been very difficult for us at birthdays, holidays, and family reunions. I feel like sadness, anguish, and pain today. I still cannot comprehend how a person could shoot his best friend. And it's hard we have to sitting, talking, eating at their table, and they keep eating. Cheers together. How can he do that? His daughter has since passed away. Sickle cell anemia. Leaving a young daughter to be reared by family. The oldest daughter had a special needs child. These children need their mother and father during these trying times in their lives. And Russell denied this opportunity. The last hearing, we were informed that Russell has since been called to the ministry, as he just said today. Good for him. So allow him to stay in prison to preach it to himself and to the other prisoners. Our family forgives, but he must suffer the consequences of his actions. He is not the giver of life, and therefore he does not have the right to take one's life. Not to mention that he took 2 lives. He is a threat to society as far as our family is concerned. Please continue to notify the family as far as possible when this hearing takes place forward, in order that we not have to be here on behalf of our brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rita, thank you. Ms. Maxine Turner.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Maxine Corbin Turner. I'm the oldest sibling. I'm here to speak on behalf of my sister. We totally oppose what's being asked here in this school today, because we have not had the opportunity to socialize, to do anything with our brother, and yet because of this egregious crime. I think that this, in my opinion, was grievous and callous for someone to kill someone in front of their small kids. These kids were never, one is on deceased, one is here today, we would never get this. Never. I didn't spend a lot of time with my brother because I was out of town. He said, I'm 80 years old, so I was gone. But I remember Carl as a gentle person. And he was really a gentle, and he did not deserve this. In my opinion, when you intentionally did something, you should pay it. And I think this was an intentional act. For Betty, and Betty was a good person, so was Glenn. And everybody thinks that their relatives are good people, but I think that they truly were. And I think they deserve justice, and justice would be that this young man remained incarcerated for the rest of his life. And my choice is that he stays in prison. I can forgive, I can forgive. This is so egregious that I think that he could remain. Thank you for your time.
Stephen, thank you. And we have Ms. Britannia Williams. Britannia, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I am Ari Williams. I first want to say that the last time that I was here, it's basically my first time hearing anything that the whole my mother has not been able to speak or tell me, or even any of what happened to my ever. So I just want to say that when we were here last time, the panel told me that you can't even admit to your crime, you need to go back to prison. It is so strange that today we finally hear you say that you can do this one. Because as I was traveling here, I was reading the court docs, which I've had since the last time, because I never even knew they existed until the last time I was. And in the court documents, he stated that he came to the scene with they were already murdered. And to hear a different version of events today, it's all as ill as he was. When I start my set statement, I just wanted to say. And I'm gonna try to get through this for me and many of you may have spent yesterday, which was Mother's Day, with your children, even blessed enough to spend enough with your family and your work. I couldn't even bear to drive from my home to my mother's home to know that we had to come here today unprepared for what we had to stand before. I, Ritaria Williams, the eldest granddaughter, Betty Williams, and Paul Court, have never been allowed that opportunity to have with my mother and my grandparents. Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthday. 42 years ago, 43 next month, my grandparents were taken away from me when my mother was just 6 years old. Just 6 years old. What a way to begin this week, y'all. Yesterday was Mother's Day. Saturday is my mother's birthday. She'll be 49 Saturday. And then today we're standing here for this, which my entire family just found out about 3 business days. Entire family, and I'm one of the registered partners. We should have had this week of celebration, love, but instead it was a week of stress, disappointments, duress, helplessness, anything that you all could ponder. It's been a week thing. Many of us may know how it feels to have grandparents. I never had. Or at least yours were not murdered. I was 23 years old with my great aunt. She's deceased now. Auntie Bunny explained to me what she thought the circumstances around my grandparents' case. I was always told a different version. I was 23, I'm 34. I was 23 years old when I actually found out what happened right before we came. The last time. My mother, as I stated, has never been able to speak about it. She's never told me what it was like to treat her parents. She never told me any stories about what she did as a child with her parents. They don't exist as far as I'm concerned. She never shared that with me or my brother. The last time we were here, I watched my mother attempt to tell you all how she felt, and she couldn't do it. The breaths that she breathed were taken away from her, and she couldn't even finish her statement. So I stand here today for the end. The first time my mom opened her mouth, she couldn't speak. But I stand here today to make sure that the 2 life sentences that he received from my grandmother and my grandfather are to be obeyed. I'm 34 years old today, and I'm still discovering how the crime that were committed so many years ago affected my life. And not only contributed to my mother's course of life, but mine and my brothers as well as my family. Russell destroyed a normal childhood, teenage years, and adulthood for my mother. That in turn has always affected me. I watched my mother struggle with so much childhood trauma that adults shouldn't even have to go through. She shouldn't even have to endure. Evidence showed that there were palm prints and ballistic evidence and weapons. And the last time we hear you still stating you did not do it.
Ms. Williams,
I understand.
can you help me?
I wrote the statement before we got.
Can you wrap it up for us, please?
Okay. Growing up, I always wanted to be a homicide detective. I never knew what drove me to be intrigued by so much crime and murder. It wasn't until after I left here that I realized it was because my grandparents were murdered. I am able to provide a big impact statement about the murders of my grandparents and the way that they affected me, but the truth is that they affected my mother, which also turns into my tears and sleepless nights to know that my mother's in pain. There's nothing I can do about it. I never known what it's like to have grandparents. I've never had any of the holidays, anything that the things that you have shared. You all are asking that he has clemency today, but I feel that we've been generous enough. He still gets to go where he is, and he's asking for conversation of consent. I am not allowed that opportunity. No one has stopped to say how we're doing or what is the truth about the struggle. Nothing that I write will ever seem enough, but I have to keep fighting for my grandparents' legacy because that's all that we have. The pain that I have is always unbearable. As I get older, I realize something was just wrong. I'm a counselor today because I realized that me and my family need healing. And I'm very thankful. The nights of the nightmares, the sleepless nights, and just wondering how my mother could survive so much. The only thing that bothers me so is that my mother is not here from the trauma. She witnessed her parents be murdered in front of her. And there's again nothing I can do. So I stand before you today asking that Russell continues his sentence that he was given all those years ago, which was 2 life sentences.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, Mr. Foy, is there a statement you'd like to make to the board before we go?
Yes, Madam Chairman. I want to do as I did before. The last time I was before the board, I did apologize. And all I can say is I messed up. And I ask for forgiveness and I ask for the mercy of this court.
All right, yes, sir. Is the report prepared today, Mrs. Jackson?
All right, first, the Corbin and Williams family, I appreciate being here. And when you said that you hadn't received any notice, I was really concerned about that because I know that the staff works very hard. And as I was going through the file, I did see a letter written by Ms. Mamie and Ruby. They were both dated March 23rd of last year. And you were thanking the board for calling to let you know that there was a commutation request. So I know that the staff worked very hard to reach out to family members. And if you didn't get the notice of the actual hearing until shortly before, we'll certainly try to figure out how that happened. But the fact that he had applied for clemency, I had been advised, and she wrote letters thanking, and then some of you said that he would be willing to use the same statements that he made in 2000. Mr. Ford, I am a person of faith. And I do understand redemption and forgiveness. But that's not the same thing as consequences. Moses didn't enter the promised land because of disobedience. David repented, but the baby still died as a result of his sin. Paul did some of his best work in prison, and he died in prison. And so consequences and grace and mercy and forgiveness are never separate. God never not imposes consequences for our sins. Jerusalem was destroyed and the Israelites, Judah went into captivity. But he displayed mercy. And so mercy and consequences are not ever separate. You know, as I listened to you today, I just saw an emptiness, or I just sensed an emptiness in you. I didn't sense any genuine understanding of the horrific nature of this crime and the just destruction that you wrought on not just one, but two families. I wasn't on the board in 2014 when you had your last hearing, so I didn't hear the fact that you denied having committed the crimes. But it seems to me you had been in prison long enough at that time to come to the point of being ready to just be honest with yourself and everybody else involved. A lot of people wear the mantle of religion. That's all it is. When I look at just the horrific nature of this crime, the cruelty of this crime to shoot two people that you knew personally in the back of their heads with their children in the car. It's just one of the worst. And we see horrible crimes every Monday. We have pardon. Every crime we hear is horrible. But this is probably the worst, the absolute worst. And the harm you have done has lasted for generations. And the efforts that you've made towards rehabilitation, in my estimation, have been not very impressive. Because you haven't done the hard work of digging into yourself and figuring out what kind of person can do this to human beings. You've taken some programs, but they're not programs that really get to who you are, why you did this. You never even took victim awareness. So I'm not impressed. I'm gonna be honest with you. I am not impressed by your profession today. I think because of the serious, horrific nature of this crime and the adamant opposition of the families of both victims. My vote today is to deny your request. Mr. Moshe.
Mr. Foy, I have intensely watched everything you've done since this hearing started. I've listened to the interview with Ms. Jackson. I've looked at your gestures, your mannerisms, and I see no true remorse, none whatsoever. When the victims were given the statement, you had a look of, I don't really care. As Mrs. Jackson says, sometimes you wear a mantle and you don't really believe what that mantle represents. I can't understand why an individual who's been incarcerated for what, 38 years? Just doesn't care about the premeditated murder of two individuals that you consider to be friends and classmates. You grew up with Mr. Coleman. You haven't taken the appropriate programs to address your issues. Victim awareness in your case should have been taken as your first opportunity. But yet, you didn't think it was necessary because you didn't really think you did anything wrong. When you got into that back seat, you knew exactly what you were about to do. And you could care less whether two young people would be exposed to your brutal violence. You need to come to the realization that you committed two horrible crimes and you need to just meditate, think about it, and come up to the realization that you have to be remorseful, truthful, before you even be considered for a commutation of sentence. Based on everything Mrs. Jackson said, what I've just articulated, I deny your request.
Mr. Rich, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I concur with comments of Ms. Jackson as well as her recommendation. Sticks nicely.
Mr. Freeman.
I agree with my colleague and also vote for the.
Right, Mr. Foy, you've received 4 votes to deny your application for clemency. So this afternoon, your application for clemency has been denied, sir.